March 15, 1987. Wei Chen had choreographed fights for Bruce Lee's final films. He'd trained Jackie Chan. Now he stood on a Hollywood soundstage while director Marcus Steinberg mocked his accent in front of 40 crew members. Can someone translate what our martial arts expert just said? The laughter cut deeper than any blade Wei had ever faced. He had two choices: fight back and lose everything, or swallow his pride and finish the film that would change his life. March 15, 1987. Wei Chen had choreographed fights for Bruce Lee's final films. He'd trained Jackie Chan. Now he stood on a Hollywood soundstage while director Marcus Steinberg mocked his accent in front of 40 crew members. Can someone translate what our martial arts expert just said? The laughter cut deeper than any blade Wei had ever faced. He had two choices: fight back and lose everything, or swallow his pride and finish the film that would change his life. Wei chose silence. The camera stopped rolling. The crew went home, and the film that should have made Wei Chen a household name was buried forever. For 35 years, Hollywood whispered about that day, about the stunt coordinator who walked away from his dream, about the director who killed a man's spirit with words. What they didn't know was that Wei Chen had been planning his response ever since. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Quiet Revolution. The Monterey fog rolled in like a shroud over Wei Chen's converted warehouse, muffling the sounds of his students practicing their forms in the adjacent studio. Through the grimy windows, he could see the silhouettes moving through their sequences, slow, deliberate, nothing like the explosive choreography that had once made him famous. These students were different, safe. They came here to learn discipline, not to risk their lives for 3 seconds of cinema magic. Wei adjusted his reading glasses and returned to the stack of insurance forms on his desk. 15 years of teaching had taught him that paperwork was the real enemy, not the brutal stunts, not the 18-hour days, not even the directors who treated stunt coordinators like disposable props. At 68, his hands still moved with the precision that had once guided Jackie through impossible sequences, but now they filled out liability waivers and equipment maintenance logs. The bell above his office door chimed. Wei looked up to see Maria Santos, his assistant instructor, hovering in the doorway with an expression he'd learned to recognize over the years. "Trouble. There's a man here to see you," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Says he's from Los Angeles, film business." Wei's pen stopped moving. In 15 years, exactly 3 people from Hollywood had made the drive up Highway 1 to his modest operation. The first had been a documentary filmmaker doing a retrospective on Bruce Lee's stunt teams. Wei had politely declined. The second was a location scout who'd gotten lost looking for the Hearst Castle. The third had been his daughter, Lily, though that visit had been personal, not professional, and had ended with her accusing him of giving up, of running away, of choosing cowardice over integrity. "Did he give a name?" Wei asked, though something cold was already settling in his stomach. Marcus Steinberg. The pen slipped from Wei's fingers, leaving a dark line across the insurance form. 35 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. 40 crew members laughing. The smell of soundstage dust. The weight of choosing silence over dignity. "Tell him I'm not available," Wei said, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. Maria didn't move. "He said to tell you it's about Lily." The words hit Wei like a missed wire, sudden and brutal. He stood so quickly his chair rolled backward into the wall, rattling the framed photographs of his former students. Local kids who'd gone on to become stunt performers, martial arts instructors, even a few who'd made it to Hollywood. Safe successes, measured victories. "Where is he?" "Front desk." "He looks—" Maria paused, searching for the right word. "Desperate." Wei moved past her through the narrow hallway that connected his office to the main studio. The sounds of practice continued, the whisper of feet across mats, the controlled breathing of focused students, normal sounds, peaceful sounds. Everything his life had become after he'd walked away from the chaos of film sets and temperamental directors and dreams that could be shattered with a single cruel comment. Marcus Steinberg stood with his back to the reception area, studying the wall of photographs that chronicled Wei's career. The legitimate part, anyway. The part before Hollywood. Images of Wei with Bruce Lee during the filming of Enter the Dragon. Action shots from Hong Kong films where directors treated stunt coordinators like collaborators, not servants. A younger Wei demonstrating wire work to a crew that listened with respect. When Steinberg turned around, Wei barely recognized him. The arrogant director who had once commanded million-dollar budgets now looked like a man who'd been hollowed out from the inside. His expensive suit hung loosely on a frame that had shrunk with age and failure. His eyes, once sharp with predatory confidence, now carried the desperate gleam of someone who'd run out of options. Wei Steinberg's voice cracked slightly on the single syllable. "Thank you for seeing me." "I haven't agreed to see you," Wei replied in English that was precise and unaccented, the product of 15 years teaching American students. "Speak quickly." Steinberg glanced around the reception area, noting the modest awards, the small-town newspaper clippings, the evidence of a life deliberately scaled down to human proportions. "I know what you must think." "You know nothing about what I think." Wei's voice carried the quiet authority he'd developed in the classroom, different from the explosive energy he'd once brought to film sets. Controlled, measured. "You mention my daughter. She's the lead in my current project. Has been for 3 months. Steinberg's words came faster now, as if he feared Wei would disappear if he didn't speak quickly enough. "It's an action film, ambitious, the kind of wire work and practical effects that, well, that requires someone with your expertise. There are younger coordinators, cheaper ones. None with your reputation, none with your—" Steinberg paused, and for a moment his mask slipped, revealing something that might have been shame. "None with your particular understanding of what this project requires." Wei felt the familiar tension building in his shoulders, the same coiled energy that had once prepared him for dangerous stunts. But this wasn't about physical danger. This was about something far more treacherous. The past, with all its unfinished business, standing in his reception area asking for help. "Why now?" Wei asked. "After 35 years, why now?" Steinberg met his eyes for the first time since entering the studio. "Because I'm dying, Wei. And before I go, I need to finish what we started." The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Wei studied Steinberg's face, searching for the lie, the manipulation, the angle that would make this revelation just another director's performance. But the hollowness in the man's cheeks, the slight tremor in his hands, the way he stood as if his bones had become too heavy for his frame, these weren't things that could be faked. "Lung cancer," Steinberg continued, his voice barely above a whisper. 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky. The doctors use words like aggressive and metastasized, like they're discussing the weather. Wei's first instinct was to feel nothing. This man had taken something from him that could never be returned, not just dignity, but the dream of what his American career might have been. The humiliation on that soundstage had followed Wei across continents and decades, a poison that had infected every subsequent opportunity, every moment of self-doubt, every time he'd chosen silence over confrontation. But standing here now, watching Steinberg struggle to maintain his composure, Wei found himself remembering something else from that night 35 years ago. Before the laughter, before the mockery, there had been a moment when Steinberg had watched Wei choreograph a fight sequence with something approaching awe. A brief recognition of artistry that had given Wei hope for their collaboration. "What does this have to do with Lily?" Wei asked. Steinberg reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a tablet. Its screen cracked across one corner like a spider web. He swiped through several images before turning it toward Wei. The photograph showed a young woman suspended 15 feet in the air, her body twisted in an impossible spiral kick, face fierce with concentration. Even through the pixelated quality of the production still, Wei could see his own features reflected in her bone structure, his own intensity burning in her eyes. "She's remarkable," Steinberg said softly. "Trained in wushu, aikido, capoeira, speaks Mandarin and Cantonese fluently. The camera loves her, and she has this quality, this fearlessness that reminds me of myself." The words came out harder than Wei intended. "Yes." Wei took the tablet, zooming in on his daughter's face. 28 years old now, though they hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since that visit when she'd accused him of abandoning his principles, of choosing comfort over courage. She'd been wrong about his motivations, but right about the outcome. He had chosen safety. He had built walls around his life high enough to keep out both failure and possibility. "The project," Wei said, handing back the tablet. "What is it exactly?" "A period piece, set in 1920s Shanghai. A story about resistance fighters using martial arts to combat foreign occupation." Steinberg's words gained momentum, the dying man momentarily replaced by the director he'd once been. "The fight scenes need to be grounded but spectacular. Real wire work, practical effects. The kind of authenticity that only comes from someone who understands both the artistry and the history." Wei felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the old excitement that came from visualizing movement, from seeing how bodies could dance through space in ways that seemed to defy physics. It was the same feeling he'd had as a young man watching Peking opera performers, realizing that combat could be poetry, that violence could transcend itself and become something beautiful. But 15 years of careful living had taught him to distrust that stirring. "She doesn't know you're here," he said. "It wasn't a question. She knows I'm looking for a stunt coordinator. She doesn't know it's you I want." Steinberg hesitated. "She's mentioned you a few times, always with this mixture of pride and frustration. She respects what you accomplished in Hong Kong, but she doesn't understand why you stopped." "Because I learned the cost of dreaming too big," Wei thought. "Because I discovered that some humiliations follow you forever. Because I chose to build something small and safe rather than risk destroying myself on the altar of other people's ambitions." Through the window, he could see his afternoon class filing into the main studio. Teenagers mostly, some adults looking for fitness, a few serious students hoping to compete regionally. Good people leading quiet lives, finding strength in discipline rather than spectacle. This was his world now, measured, controllable, free from the chaos of film sets and the cruelty of men like the one standing before him. "I need to think about it," Wei said finally. Steinberg nodded, reaching into his pocket again. This time he withdrew a business card, its edges worn as if it had been handled many times. "My number's on there. The shoot starts in 2 weeks if we can finalize the team." He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "She talks about you with such intensity, Wei, like she's still trying to figure out who you really are. Maybe this is a chance for both of you to find that answer." When the door closed behind him, Wei was left alone with the ghosts of 35 years and the terrible knowledge that some choices, once made, echo through generations. Inciting incident. Wei stood motionless in his empty reception area for several minutes after Steinberg left, the business card heavy in his palm despite weighing nothing at all. The afternoon fog had thickened outside, transforming his students in the main studio into ghostly silhouettes. Their movements seemed distant now, as if he were watching them through the wrong end of a telescope. He walked to his office on unsteady legs, closing the door behind him with unusual care. The insurance forms still lay scattered across his desk, but they belonged to a different life now, one that had existed 30 minutes ago before the past had walked through his door wearing a dying man's face. Wei pulled open the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, pushing aside tax documents and equipment warranties until his fingers found the manila envelope he hadn't touched in 5 years. The paper had yellowed at the edges, and his name was written across the front in familiar handwriting, Wei Chen, in Lily's precise characters, followed by personal underlined 3 times. Inside were the letters she'd sent during the first 2 years after their falling out. He'd read each one dozens of times before finally storing them away, unable to answer but unwilling to discard them. The most recent one was dated 18 months ago. "Dad, I got the part. Lead actress in a Marcus Steinberg film. I know you remember him and I know you'll have opinions about me working with him. But here's the thing, I'm not you. I won't let someone's past behavior dictate my choices. Maybe that's the difference between us. You taught me to fight, but you never taught me when to stop fighting. The film is everything I've trained for. Wire work, practical stunts, the kind of authentic action sequences you used to create in Hong Kong. Sometimes I watch your old films and I see what you were capable of, what you gave up when you came to America. I still don't understand why you let them silence you. I miss our conversations about technique, about the philosophy behind movement. I miss having a father who believed in something bigger than insurance forms and liability waivers. Call me if you ever remember who you used to be. Wei set the letter down with trembling fingers. The irony cut through him like a blade. His daughter working with the very man who had destroyed his American dreams, not knowing the history between them, seeing her father's caution as cowardice rather than hard-won wisdom. The phone on his desk rang, jarring him back to the present. He considered letting it go to voicemail, but old habits died hard. Monterey Martial Arts. Mr. Chen? The voice was young, female, unfamiliar. This is Jessica Park from Variety. I'm calling to verify some information for a story we're running tomorrow. Wei's throat tightened. What kind of information? We have it confirmed that Marcus Steinberg has approached you about coordinating stunts for his new film Shadow and Flame. Can you comment on whether you've accepted the position? The question hit him like a physical blow. How could they possibly know? Steinberg had left his office less than an hour ago. Unless... No comment, Wei managed. Sources close to the production say this would be your first Hollywood project since the infamous incident on the Dragon's Gate set in 1987. Is it true that you and Steinberg are putting aside past differences for this collaboration? The infamous incident. That's what they were calling it now. 35 years reduced to a euphemism, his humiliation transformed into entertainment industry folklore. I said no comment. One final question, Mr. Chen. How do you feel about working with your daughter, given that you two have been estranged for several years? The phone slipped from Wei's fingers, clattering onto his desk. Through the thin walls, he could hear Maria leading the afternoon class through their forms, her voice calling out corrections and encouragement. Normal sounds from a normal day that no longer existed. He ended the call and immediately dialed Steinberg's number, his hands shaking with rage. You leaked this story, Wei said, when Steinberg answered. Wei? I don't know what you're... Variety just called me. They know about your offer, about my daughter, about 1987. You orchestrated this. A long pause. When Steinberg spoke again, his voice carried exhaustion rather than defensiveness. I'm desperate, Wei. The studio is threatening to pull funding if I can't attach a name coordinator by Monday. My publicist thought if word got out that I was courting you specifically... Another pause. I'm sorry. I should have asked first. You should have respected my privacy. You're right, but it's out there now. The story runs tomorrow morning. Wei sank into his chair, understanding with crystalline clarity that his carefully constructed quiet life was about to be shattered. By tomorrow, every industry publication would be rehashing the Dragon's Gate incident. His students would read about their humble instructor's secret Hollywood history. And Lily would discover that the father she'd accused of cowardice was being courted by the very director she was working with. She doesn't know yet, Wei said. No, but she will by morning. Wei closed his eyes, seeing his peaceful existence crumbling like a controlled demolition. There was no going back now, no returning to the safety of insurance forms and regional competitions. The past had not only returned, it had brought cameras and journalists, and the pitiless scrutiny of an industry that devoured privacy like a hungry beast. When he opened his eyes, his reflection in the dark window showed a man who looked older than his 68 years, but whose spine had straightened with a familiar tension. He was no longer just a small-town instructor whose greatest concern was liability waivers. He was Wei Chen again, whether he wanted to be or not. The first call came at 5:47 a.m., jarring Wei from restless sleep. He let it ring through to voicemail, but the silence lasted only 30 seconds before it started again, and again. By the fourth call, he surrendered to wakefulness and reached for the phone, squinting at the unknown number on the screen. Before he could speak, a voice he didn't recognize launched into questions about his triumphant return to Hollywood and whether he harbored any resentment about the Dragon's Gate situation. Wei hung up and immediately turned off the phone. But technology had evolved beyond his ability to hide from it. His doorbell rang 20 minutes later, a delivery driver with an oversized coffee and a pastry bag from a trendy cafe 40 miles away. The note attached read, "Congratulations on the comeback. Let's discuss your story. TMZ." Wei left the coffee on his doorstep and watched from behind his curtains as a van with tinted windows idled across the street. A photographer with a telephoto lens sat in a sedan 2 houses down, apparently believing that Wei couldn't see him crouched behind his dashboard. This was how it started, he remembered. The slow erosion of privacy, the transformation of personal choice into public spectacle. In Hong Kong, journalists had respected boundaries, understanding that artists needed space to create. American media treated privacy like a challenge to be conquered. At 7:30, Maria called from the studio. Her voice carried an unfamiliar tension. "Wei, I'm here early setting up for the 9 o'clock class, but..." She paused. "There are people outside, with cameras. Mrs. Peterson from next door called and said they've been there since sunrise asking questions about you." Wei closed his eyes. Mrs. Peterson was 73 and thrived on neighborhood gossip. By noon, she would have shared every detail of his quiet life with anyone willing to listen. "Cancel the morning classes," he said. "All of them? Wei, that's 42 students. Some drove an hour to get here. Tell them there's a family emergency." It wasn't entirely a lie. His phone buzzed with a text message, the first since he'd turned off calls. The number was blocked, but the message made his chest tighten. Saw the news. "We need to talk, L." 28 years old, and she still signed texts with a single initial, the way she'd done as a child, leaving notes on his bathroom mirror. "Gone to Sarah's house. El piano recital at 3 p.m. Late you." L. After their first real fight when she was 16. He stared at the message for several minutes, composing and deleting responses. I didn't know he would leak it. Too defensive. "Can you come here?" Too presumptuous. "I'm sorry." For what? For keeping his past private? For being ambushed by a dying man's desperation? Before he could settle on words, another text arrived. "Coffee shop on Lighthouse Ave. 1 hour. Don't bring reporters." The assumption that he had somehow courted this attention stung more than he expected. Wei had spent 15 years becoming invisible, perfecting the art of existing without creating ripples. The idea that Lily thought he would deliberately orchestrate this circus revealed how completely she misunderstood the man he'd become. But he dressed carefully anyway, choosing clothes that wouldn't photograph well. A plain gray sweater that washed out his complexion, dark jeans that added bulk to his frame. Small acts of rebellion against an attention he'd never wanted. The drive to Lighthouse Avenue required navigating 3 separate cars that followed him with the persistence of hunting dogs. Wei took unnecessary turns, doubled back through parking lots, even stopped at a grocery store and browsed produce for 20 minutes, until the photographers grew bored and retreated to a respectful distance. The coffee shop Lily had chosen was deliberately anonymous, a place where laptops outnumbered conversations and everyone minded their own business. Wei spotted her in a corner booth before she saw him, and the sight knocked the breath from his lungs. She'd inherited his bone structure but her mother's grace, creating a combination that photographs couldn't fully capture. Even sitting still, she radiated the controlled energy of someone who understood her body as an instrument. But there was something new in the set of her shoulders, a wariness that made her look older than her years. When she finally noticed him approaching, her expression cycled through emotions too quickly to track. Surprise, anger, something that might have been relief, then a careful blankness that reminded him painfully of himself. "You look tired," she said without preamble. Wei slid into the seat across from her, noting the way other customers' eyes lingered on their table a moment too long. Even here, anonymity was an illusion. "Didn't sleep well." "I imagine not." Lily's voice carried the precise diction she'd developed for American film sets, each word chosen carefully. "Marcus told me about his visit yesterday. He seemed to think you might actually consider his offer." The way she said Marcus's name, familiar, comfortable, sent warning signals through Wei's nervous system. This wasn't just a professional relationship. "And what did you tell him?" Wei asked. Lily's smile held no warmth. "I told him he was delusional if he thought my father would risk his precious, safe little life for anything as dangerous as ambition." The words hit Wei like a physical blow, but it was the casual cruelty in Lily's tone that left him breathless. She spoke of his caution as if it were a character defect, his hard-won peace as cowardice. The coffee shop's ambient noise, laptop keyboards, whispered conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, seemed to fade until only her accusation remained hanging between them. You don't understand what happened, Wei said quietly. Then explain it to me. Lily leaned forward, her voice dropping to match his. Because from where I sit, it looks like you had everything. Talent, connections, a daughter who believed in you, and you threw it all away to become a small-town instructor who teaches soccer moms basic self-defense. Wei studied her face, searching for traces of the little girl who used to watch him choreograph fight sequences in their garage, mimicking his movements with serious concentration. That child had looked at him like he could reshape reality through pure will and precise technique. This woman looked at him like he was a puzzle she'd grown tired of trying to solve. Marcus Steinberg destroyed my career, Wei said. Not just criticized it, destroyed it. The night of the incident. Lily's laugh was bitter. You make it sound like a natural disaster instead of a choice you made to stay silent. I was protecting myself. And protecting you. From what? Success? Recognition? Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. She caught herself, forcing her tone back down. Do you know what it's like growing up as the daughter of a legend who refuses to be legendary? Watching your old films, seeing what you were capable of, then coming home to find you grading insurance forms? Wei felt something crack inside his chest. Those films were made in Hong Kong, where I understood the rules, where respect meant something. In Hollywood, I was just another foreign curiosity to be discarded when the novelty wore off. So you discarded yourself first. The accuracy of the observation was devastating. Wei had indeed chosen self-erasure over the possibility of further humiliation. He'd convinced himself it was wisdom, but sitting across from his daughter's disappointed face, it felt like the cowardice she'd named it. You're working with him, Wei said, deflecting. Marcus, this isn't just professional. Lily's carefully controlled expression flickered. That's not relevant. It is if you're sleeping with the man who destroyed your father's dreams. The slap came so quickly that Wei barely registered the movement. His cheek burned, but worse was the immediate regret that flashed across Lily's face before she buried it under fresh anger. How dare you, she whispered. You abandoned your dreams. Marcus didn't steal them, you gave them up. And yes, I'm working with him. Yes, I respect him as a director and as a man who's trying to create something meaningful with the time he has left. But what happens between us is none of your business. You forfeited the right to paternal concern when you chose silence over standing up for yourself. Wei touched his cheek, tasting blood where his teeth had cut the inside of his mouth. Around them, the coffee shop had fallen into the particular quiet that follows public confrontation. Conversations suspended, attention carefully averted. He's sick, Wei said. Marcus. Did he tell you that? Of course he told me. We don't keep secrets from each other. The emphasis was deliberate, designed to wound. And you think this film will save him? That working with the man who humiliated me will somehow give his life meaning? Lily's eyes blazed. I think he's brave enough to try, which is more than I can say for you. Wei felt the familiar urge to retreat, to apologize, to restore the fragile peace they'd maintained through years of careful distance. But the sting on his cheek and the contempt in his daughter's voice ignited something he'd buried for 15 years. The same pride that had driven him to attempt American cinema in the first place. You want to know what really happened that night? Wei asked. You want to understand why I chose silence? I've wanted to know for 20 years. Wei pulled out his phone, scrolling through old contacts until he found what he was looking for. The video file was small, poor quality, recorded on someone's early digital camera. He'd forgotten he still had it until this moment. Marcus didn't just mock my accent, Wei said, placing the phone on the table between them. He did something else, something I've never told anyone. Watch this, then tell me about cowardice. Lily stared at the phone as if it might explode. What is it? The end of everything I thought I was. As her finger hovered over the play button, Wei realized he was crossing a line he could never uncross. The truth he'd guarded for 35 years was about to detonate in the space between them, and he had no idea whether it would bridge the distance or destroy them both. Lily pressed play, and the small screen flickered to life with grainy footage that looked like it had been shot through a keyhole. The timestamp read October 15th, 1987. Wei watched his daughter's face as she squinted at the low-quality video, trying to make sense of the dimly lit room and muffled voices. "Turn the volume up," Wei said quietly. The audio crackled as she adjusted the settings. Suddenly, voices became clearer. American accents, casual laughter, the clink of glasses. Someone was having a party. "Told you that Chinamen would be perfect for this," a voice said off camera. Wei saw Lily's jaw tighten at the slur. All that wire work bullshit. Jumping around like a monkey in pajamas. More laughter. The camera swayed drunkenly, finally focusing on a familiar figure holding court near a leather couch. Marcus Steinberg, 35 years younger but unmistakably him, gesticulating wildly with a tumbler of whiskey. "The best part," Marcus continued, his voice slurred but carrying clearly through the phone's speaker, "is that he actually thinks this is his big break. Like we're going to let some Hong Kong stuntman become the next big action coordinator in Hollywood." Lily's face had gone pale. "Wei, this is—" "Keep watching." On screen, someone handed Marcus what looked like a piece of paper. He held it up theatrically, and Wei's stomach clenched as he recognized his own handwriting, the carefully composed letter he'd written to the studio executives outlining his vision for the film's action sequences. "Listen to this," Marcus said, clearing his throat with exaggerated ceremony. "Honorable sirs, I am most grateful for the opportunity to bring authentic martial arts philosophy to American cinema." Marcus adopted a grotesque parody of a Chinese accent, his voice high and sing-song. "In Hong Kong films, we understand that fight is like dance, requiring harmony between body and spirit." The room erupted in cruel laughter. Someone shouted, "Do the voice again!" Another called out, "Ask him about Confucius." Wei watched his daughter's expression crumble as the video continued. Marcus was warming to his performance now, encouraged by his audience's reaction. "Most respectfully, I believe Western audiences are ready for more sophisticated action sequences," Marcus continued in his mocking accent. "With your permission, I would like to demonstrate the difference between Hollywood fake fighting and true martial arts artistry." "Jesus Christ," someone said off camera. "Did he really write 'most respectfully' at the end of every paragraph?" "3 times, Marcus confirmed, waving the letter, like a broken fortune cookie. He stumbled slightly, catching himself on the couch arm. "Here's the thing nobody understands about these Hong Kong guys. They're desperate. They'll do anything, take any abuse because they know they'll never belong here. Wei Chen thinks if he just bows low enough, speaks carefully enough, maybe we'll forget he's not one of us." Lily's hand was pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "The studio wants authenticity?" Marcus continued. "Fine. We'll let him choreograph his little fight scenes. But when the film gets edited, when the real decisions get made, it'll be American sensibilities that win out. He's just there to add exotic flavor, like MSG in cheap Chinese food." The camera swayed again, losing focus before settling on Marcus's face as he took another sip of whiskey. "Best part is, he'll thank us for the opportunity. These people are trained from birth to be grateful for scraps from the white man's table." Wei reached over and paused the video. The coffee shop's ambient noise rushed back, sounds that seemed impossibly loud after the intimate cruelty of the recording. Lily sat motionless, staring at the frozen image of Marcus's younger face, twisted with casual racist contempt. "There's more," Wei said quietly. "But you've seen enough." Lily's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Who recorded this?" "Marcus's assistant director. He was having an affair with the script supervisor, thought he was being discreet filming the party for her." Wei's throat felt raw. "She brought me the tape the next morning, said she thought I should know what I was walking into." "And you never confronted him?" Wei almost laughed at the impossibility of the question. "Confront him with what? His private opinion? His right to mock a letter I'd written in my imperfect English?" He paused. "This was 1987, Lily. There was no internet, no social media outrage, no movement to hold people accountable for racism. There was just me, alone in a system that saw me exactly the way Marcus described." Lily was crying now, silent tears that tracked down her cheeks without her seeming to notice. "He's not the same person anymore. People change." But even as she said it, Wei could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. The video had recontextualized everything. Marcus's current desperation, his approach to Wei, his relationship with Lily herself. Was she truly valued for her talent, Or was she just the latest exotic flavor in Marcus Steinberg's long career of using people he secretly despised? Perhaps, Wei said. But I've learned that people rarely change as much as we need them to. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving mascara smudges that made her look younger, more vulnerable. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a tremor that betrayed the careful composure she'd maintained throughout their confrontation. "I need to call him," she said, reaching for her phone. "Lily, wait." Wei's hand moved halfway across the table before stopping. The gesture felt too intimate, too presumptuous after years of careful distance. "What will you say?" "I don't know." She stared at her phone's screen, thumb hovering over Marcus's contact. "Ask him if it was all true, if he still sees me the way he saw you?" Her laugh was bitter, self-deprecating. God, how naive am I. Of course he does. Wei watched her face cycle through emotions, anger giving way to humiliation, then hardening into something sharper. It was like watching his own realization play out in fast motion, the moment when respect curdled into understanding. "The film we're making," Lily said slowly, "the one he wants you to help with. Do you know what it's about?" He mentioned it was an action piece, independent production. "It's called The Last Stand." Lily's voice had gone flat, clinical, about an aging American stunt coordinator who travels to Asia looking for one final collaboration with a legendary Hong Kong choreographer. "The Asian character," she stopped, closing her eyes. Jesus Christ. "The Asian character is grateful for the opportunity, keeps thanking the American for believing in him." Wei felt ice crystallize in his chest. The parallels were too precise to be coincidental. Marcus hadn't just sought him out for his skills, he'd been mining their history for material, turning Wei's humiliation into entertainment. "There's more," Lily continued, her voice barely audible. "The Hong Kong choreographer has a daughter who works in American films. She's estranged from her father because she thinks he gave up too easily, that he wasn't strong enough to succeed in Hollywood." The coffee shop seemed to tilt around them. Wei gripped the edge of the table, fighting a wave of nausea. Marcus hadn't just destroyed his career once, he was planning to do it again, this time using Lily as an unwitting accomplice in her own exploitation. "He's been using us," Lily whispered. "Both of us. This whole project, bringing us back together." She looked up at Wei with eyes that held a terrible new understanding. He wanted to see if life would imitate his art, if he could manipulate us into playing out the exact dynamic he'd written. Wei's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number saw your daughter at the coffee shop. "Nice reunion. We should meet tomorrow to discuss the project. Time is running short." The casual surveillance implicit in the message sent rage flooding through Wei's system. Marcus was watching them even now, treating their private conversation like a performance for his entertainment. "He's been tracking us," Wei said, showing Lily the message. She read it twice, her expression darkening. "That's not possible. I didn't tell him where we were meeting." "He doesn't need your permission to follow you, or to follow me." Wei thought of the photographers outside his house, the reporters camping on his quiet street. This was all orchestrated, the media attention, the pressure, even this conversation. He's been pulling strings the entire time. Lily stood abruptly, coffee sloshing from her untouched cup. Other patrons glanced over at the sudden movement, then quickly looked away. "I need air." Wei followed her outside, where the Monterey fog had rolled in thick and gray, reducing visibility to a few yards in any direction. The weather felt appropriate, everything obscured, reality becoming uncertain. 35 years, Lily said, pacing the sidewalk like a caged animal. He's been carrying this around for 35 years, and now he wants to turn it into his final masterpiece. The dying director's last confession, except he makes himself the hero and us, the supporting characters in his redemption story. "What do you want to do?" Wei asked. Lily stopped pacing, turning to face him with an expression he'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, dangerous. For the first time since childhood, she looked exactly like him. "I want to give him what he's asking for," she said. "I want to collaborate with my father on his final action sequence. But not the way he expects." Wei felt something shift inside his chest. like tectonic plates rearranging after decades of pressure. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Marcus Steinberg is about to learn the difference between using people and underestimating them. Lily's smile held no warmth, only sharp edges. He wants authentic Hong Kong martial arts philosophy? Let's show him what that really means. The fog swirled around them, and for the first time in 15 years, Wei Chen began to plan. Climax. The fog seemed to part as they walked, as if the city itself was clearing a path for what needed to happen. Wei felt his old instincts awakening, the choreographer's mind that could see 3 moves ahead, anticipating how bodies would move through space and time. But this wasn't about staging a fight scene, this was about orchestrating truth. His hotel, Wei said as they reached his car. The Intercontinental. He always stays there when he's in California. Old habits from when the studio paid for everything. Lily nodded, her jaw set with determination that reminded Wei painfully of her mother. He'll be expecting us to come crawling back, ready to play our assigned roles in his little drama. They drove in silence through streets made ghostly by the marine layer. Wei's hands were steady on the wheel, but his heart hammered with the rhythm of decisions made and unmade over 35 years. How many times had he imagined this confrontation? How many versions had he choreographed in his mind during sleepless nights in his empty house? The hotel lobby was all marble and understated wealth, the kind of place that made visitors feel either privileged or diminished. Wei had felt diminished here before. Tonight, walking beside his daughter, he felt something else entirely. Marcus's suite was on the 15th floor. Wei knocked, 3 precise raps like a martial arts salute. Wei and Lily. Marcus opened the door wearing the same calculating smile Wei remembered from 3 decades ago. He looked frailer now, the cancer eating at him from within, but his eyes held the same predatory intelligence. I was hoping you'd come. We have so much to discuss. The suite was exactly what Wei had expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Monterey Bay. Expensive furniture arranged to suggest casual sophistication. Scripts and storyboards covered a large table, and Wei caught glimpses of his own stories sketched out in neat panels. Drink? Marcus gestured toward a well-stocked bar. I remember you used to enjoy good whiskey, Wei, back in the old days. The old days, Wei repeated quietly. Yes, let's talk about those. Marcus's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. Something in Wei's tone had registered, a note that didn't match the script Marcus had written in his head. Please sit. Marcus gestured toward the couch, but Wei remained standing. Lily positioned herself near the window, arms crossed, watching. I've been thinking about our project. The action sequences could be revolutionary if we approach them correctly. East meets West, tradition embracing innovation, like fortune cookies, Wei said. The reference hung in the air like incense. Marcus's face went very still. I'm sorry? Fortune cookies, Wei repeated, his voice carrying the weight of years. Cheap Chinese food with American sensibilities. Isn't that how you describe my work? Like MSG? Exotic flavor for Western consumption? Marcus's carefully maintained color drained away. His eyes darted to Lily, then back to Wei, calculating rapidly. I don't know what you're referring to. October 15th, 1987. Wei's voice was steady, surgical in its precision. Your apartment in Beverly Hills. The party after we finished the first week of shooting. You had quite a lot to say about Hong Kong's stuntmen that night. About gratitude and bowing low enough and knowing our place. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus sank into a chair as if his legs had given out, his face cycling through expressions, confusion, recognition, fear, and finally a kind of terrible resignation. Someone recorded it, he whispered. Someone recorded it, Wei confirmed. And I've carried that recording for 35 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. Dad. Lily's voice was sharp, confused. This wasn't the plan they'd discussed. But Wei continued, his focus entirely on Marcus. Do you know what the worst part was? Not the racism, I'd heard that before. Not the mockery, I'd survived that too. The worst part was realizing you were right about one thing. I was grateful. Even after I saw that video, I was ready to take whatever scraps you offered because I thought that was my only chance. Marcus's hands were shaking now. Wei, that was decades ago. I was young, stupid. You were 37 years old. Wei cut him off. The same age I was when you destroyed my career. Old enough to know exactly what you were doing. What do you want? Marcus's voice cracked. Money? Credit? I can fix this. I want you to understand something. Wei moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. You didn't just take my career, you took my relationship with my daughter. You took my faith in my own worth. You took 15 years of my life and turned them into silence. Wei reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. Marcus stared at it like it was a loaded weapon. This contains the complete recording. 30 minutes of you and your friends discussing the best ways to humiliate and exploit Asian talent in Hollywood. Wei set it carefully on the coffee table. I'm giving it to you. Marcus blinked, confused. What? You're dying, Wei said simply. And I've spent too many years letting dead things control my life. Keep the recording. Destroy it. Use it for inspiration. I don't care anymore. Wei turned toward the door, then paused. But if you ever use my daughter the way you used me, if you ever reduce her to exotic flavoring for your American stories, I will make sure that recording finds its way to every journalist, every studio executive, and every film school student in this country. He looked at Lily, seeing something new in her eyes, not admiration exactly, but recognition, understanding. Coming? He asked. Together, they walked out, leaving Marcus Steinberg alone with his guilt and his borrowed time. In the elevator, Lily took Wei's hand. That wasn't what I expected, she said softly. Neither was any of this. Wei squeezed her fingers. But some things are more important than revenge. The doors opened, and they stepped into the night, finally moving forward. Resolution. The fog had lifted by the time they reached Wei's house, revealing stars scattered across the Monterey sky like scattered rice grains. Neither had spoken during the drive, but the silence felt different now, not empty, but full of possibilities they were both still learning to name. Wei parked in his driveway and sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. The porch light was on, casting a warm yellow glow over the garden his wife had planted 20 years ago. He'd maintained it carefully all these years, though he'd never been sure why. Will you come in? He asked. Lily nodded, and they walked together up the path lined with jasmine and small jade plants. Inside, the house felt different too, less like a museum of interrupted dreams, more like a home waiting to be lived in again. Tea? Wei asked, falling back on the ritual of hospitality. Please. He moved through the familiar motions of brewing jasmine tea, the same ceremony he'd performed countless times alone. But with Lily sitting at his kitchen table, the routine felt new, purposeful. She was examining the photographs on his refrigerator, pictures of her from childhood, school plays, graduation, her first film credit, evidence of a love that had persisted despite distance. You kept everything, she said softly. I never stopped being proud of you. Wei set the teacups down gently, even when I didn't know how to show it. They drank in comfortable quiet, steam rising between them like incense. Outside, the night was perfectly still, the kind of California evening that felt suspended in time. What happens now? Lily asked eventually. Wei considered the question. Tomorrow, Marcus would wake up in his hotel suite with a flash drive containing 35 years of buried truth. He would have to decide what to do with that weight, how to carry it through whatever time remained to him. The young screenwriter who had once mocked Wei's careful English was now a dying man facing his own legacy of cruelty. Now we move forward, Wei said. You continue building your career on your own terms. I go back to teaching, but perhaps with less hiding. He paused, looking at his daughter's face in the soft kitchen light. And maybe we learn how to be family again. Lily nodded, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I'm sorry I blamed you for giving up. I never understood. You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how. Wei reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Your mother used to say that anger is just love with nowhere to go. You were angry because you loved me, even when I made it difficult. I still love you, Lily whispered. I know. They talked until nearly midnight, carefully at first, then with growing ease. Wei told her about the quiet satisfaction he'd found in teaching, how watching young stunt performers discover their abilities had slowly healed something in him he'd thought was permanently broken. Lily shared stories from film sets, the small victories and daily compromises that made up an acting career in an industry still learning to see beyond stereotypes. When she finally stood to leave, they embraced in the doorway, tentatively at first, then with the fierce intensity of people who'd been holding back for too long. "Will you visit again?" Wei asked. "Yes," Lily said. "And maybe next time you could show me some of those action sequences you've been teaching. I'd like to learn from my father." After she left, Wei sat alone in his living room, surrounded by the accumulated quiet of 15 years. But the silence felt different now, not hollow, but expectant. On the mantelpiece, his old Hong Kong awards caught the lamplight, no longer monuments to failure, but reminders of skill, artistry, a lifetime of work that had value beyond Hollywood's recognition. His phone buzzed. A text from Lily, "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." Wei smiled, typed back, "Thank you for reminding me I still had it." He made himself another cup of tea and stepped onto his back porch. The garden stretched before him in the moonlight. Jasmine and jade, carefully tended, patiently growing. Tomorrow he would return to his classes, to the young stunt performers who trusted him to guide them safely through sequences that looked like controlled violence but were actually elaborate dances. Next week, Lily would begin filming a new project, not Marcus's exploitation, but something else, something chosen freely. Marcus himself would face whatever reckoning his conscience demanded, carrying the weight of truth instead of hiding from it. Wei Chen breathed the night air and felt, for the first time in decades, the simple peace of a man who had nothing left to prove. The boy who had dreamed of making movies in Hong Kong, the young man who had chased those dreams to Hollywood, the father who had loved imperfectly but persistently. All of them were still there, integrated finally into someone whole. The stars wheeled overhead, and Wei went inside to sleep.